Welcome back with us tonight here on the Newsfeed Late Night. Your reporting continues. Home Affairs Department has signed an agreement with the United Nations Refugee Agency to eliminate delays and a backlog in decisions on applications for asylum seekers in South Africa. For more on this, I am joined by Home Affairs Minister Mdluli. Minister, good evening and thank you very much for your time tonight on the Newsfeed Late Night.
Good evening, Thabo. Good evening to the listeners and the viewers out there. Now, and thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure, only a pleasure. Now, in your address, as you were launching this partnership with the UNHCR, you're saying this problem dates back to at least 2008 when there was a financial meltdown in the whole entire world. But you saw a jump in numbers from numbers you were looking at in 1998 of 11,135 asylum seekers. That jumped to about 207,000 in 2008 and in 2009. And then you were left with a situation where you had now 400,000 asylum seekers in the system, a system which could not be able to handle that. How does this partnership address that problem?
Yes, indeed, Thabo. Here, remember, we're talking about people who went through the asylum system and they were rejected. In other words, they did not qualify to become refugees and attain international protection. Then they had to appeal. That's where the problem started. Because of the huge numbers, the appeal process got blocked for many years. Also because of the act, the law under which these appeal processes go. The appeal process is made to an independent tribunal called RASA, the Refugee Appeals Authority of South Africa. In terms of the act, it must have 5 members, and only one of them is a lawyer. And they cannot hear any case unless they've got a quorum. And the quorum is 3 people, which means for every case, the 3 of them must sit together, such that the other 2 will not be able to do anything. So they end up being only 3 members. And that's one of the problems. So we've done 2 things. We've changed the act. And that all members must actually be lawyers. But then the agreement which we have signed is going to dramatically change the situation, because we are going to increase the number of members tenfold. In other words, we are going to hire 36 extra lawyers to do the job over the next 4 years, rather than having only 3 lawyers. Also, they've injected a lot of money for technology and equipment, but they are also going to give technical support.
Now, the numbers that we're currently looking at, you're saying is 157,000 as far as the backlog is concerned, and the Auditor General saying, well, it would take 68 years to clear that. What would have changed? I mean, are you saying just an addition of 33 people will be able to cut that number down in what, 2 to 3 years?
Well, Thabo, since the Auditor General uttered those words, and maybe let's complete the sentence. The Auditor General said at this rate, if nothing changes, it goes according to the rate at which it was going. It will take 68 years to clear that number of people who are appealing. Now, I have just told you that a lot of things changed since the Auditor General uttered those words. The first thing is that we changed the mode of the appeals, whereby each appeal was supposed to be heard by 3 people. Look, let me give you an analogy, Thabo. In the justice system in South Africa, when a case is very complex, they say you need a full bench. And a full bench is 3 judges sitting together at any one time. Now you can imagine that's how the Refugee Appeals Authority was working. They were working on the basis of a full bench. If you apply that full bench to every single case that goes to court in South Africa, it will take similar number of years to clear all the court cases that are in the country. But if you change and say there are as many judges and as many magistrates, each one of them can hear a case, then it will make a huge difference. That's what we had to do because we had amended the law. But the second thing we are saying, there were only 3 members of this tribunal. It was the chairperson, who is supposed to be a lawyer, and 2 other members. Now we have changed the act again and said all of them must be lawyers, but we are now saying they are no longer going to be 3. They are going to be 36 in number. This 3 Thabo used to travel from province to province because there are 5 refugee reception centers in the country. 1 in Musina, 1 here in Pretoria, the Desmond Tutu Refugee Reception Center, 1 in Cape Town, the other in Nelson Mandela Bay, and the last one in eThekwini. These 3 people have to travel from province to province going to those centers. Now, with this extra cash, we are going to make sure that each center has got its permanent staff who don't have to travel, but will hear cases there. That's why we are confident that things will change.
Yeah. Now, of course, you are talking in addition of people. The situation is such that regardless of the fact that refugees have rights in the country and so on and so forth, it was not really the number of people that refugees are raising as a concern, more than it is how the people were treating them, the ill sentiment that they experience towards, the experience rather coming from the officials at Home Affairs. How are we dealing with that?
Well, Thabo, when we signed this agreement with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, it was to clear the backlog. And it was also to help train our people. If some, and also help to pay surveillance to the system, in other words, to work together with them. There is no policy that people must be ill-treated. If anybody has been ill-treated, they must report the matter, and we believe the extra staff and the training of people will make sure that things run smoothly. But the objective of this partnership we signed with United Nations is basically to clear this backlog. Okay.
So, I mean, you're saying the principle is that people should not be turned away, because others are saying we stand there, and you know the complaint, Minister, I don't have to repeat it to you, but it says we stand there, for example, in long queues the whole day, and by the time you even eventually get to the door, then they just saying, your application is clearly abusive, you must just go back, you know, and this keeps going and continuing.
Well, I've just informed you about what happened, Thabo. I don't think for that we can blame the workers in the country who are doing that job. Look, people attain refugee status through this, what you call the Refugee Act, South Africa's Refugee Act of 1998, which is based on the United Nations Convention of 1951. That convention is not unambiguous, it's very clear. It says clearly, it's not ambiguous, I mean to say, it's clearly unambiguous. It says you attain refugee status if you can prove that the country you come from, firstly, there is war, and you are running away from that war. Secondly, you are being persecuted. You are persecuted for your political beliefs and activities. You are persecuted for your religious beliefs and activities. You are persecuted for your traditional beliefs and activities, or you are persecuted for your sexual orientation. Now, as I said, this backlog started building up after the 2008 economic collapse around the whole world. So most of the people who came were actually economic migrants who did not fit into the structure, the Act, and the United Nations Convention. And when the officers reject them in terms of that, they say they are being ill-treated or they are being reversed. In terms of the Act, the 1998 Act in South Africa and the United Nations Convention, it does not provide for economic migrants. It provides only for those categories I've mentioned. Yeah. And that's why many people did not get successful, and they complain because of that.
So how do we then deal with their denial? I mean, that it doesn't continue to perpetuate their state of destitution?
Well, that's why the United Nations must come in. Our Act and the United Nations Convention do not provide for economic immigration. It provides for immigration on those grounds as mentioned. Now, that is beyond the Department of Home Affairs. It's for the whole continent to make sure that we resolve the economy of the continent, we improve such that people don't have to run away from their countries because of lack of jobs, because of poverty, and because of hunger.
And how then do we protect the system? I mean, this 147 million rand cash injection, you're saying it will hire more people, but also it will upgrade the IT system. How do we protect the system from abuse?
Well, there are two committees, Thabo, the appeal committees. Or let me start from the beginning. Firstly, when you arrive here, you are an asylum seeker. You arrive at the refugee reception center. The person who will meet you and ask you questions is called an RSDO, Refugee Status Determination Officer. Is the one who will listen to you and compare what you are saying to the Act and the United Nations Convention. If he then rejects you, you appeal. You can appeal to one of the two structures, the Refugee Appeals Authority, which I've mentioned, or another committee called SCRA, the Standing Committee on Refugee Affairs. Those whose application are believed to be either abusive or fraudulent, etc., they will go in front of SCRA. But those who have just been rejected because they don't fit in with the legal requirements, then they'll go to Refugee Affairs Appeals Committee. Now, all that we are doing is to give them a chance. And remember, here in South Africa, at the end of that appeal process, if you haven't won, we have got to deport you, unfortunately. Because if you have not won your refugee status gives you a right for international protection. And it's not everybody who just ends it. It's not just end because you ran away from your country. It's not just automatic, as many people believe. I've heard a lot of people say, no, the problem in South Africa will be solved if everybody is documented. We can't just give you documents because you are looking for them. You have got to qualify for them in terms of the laws of the country and in terms of the convention.
Minister, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us tonight and sharing that for us here on the Newsfeed Late Night. That's Home Affairs Minister, Dr. Mdluli.